What to say to you now in the soft afternoon.
We're in an age where the liberal tendency to be seen as a decent person is to repost.
Where is your fire?
My actual hardship and pain that is stemmed from slavery and capitalism and mass incarceration.
Like wherever I go, I'm a black woman, and that's all I will ever be.
What's your name, ma'am? Your face right now.
Because that's what people are missing. They're missing our perspective.
Rhythms and they jazz. The fight of sit-ins and marches that made us jump boundaries and barriers.
All right. Can I get your name and your pronouns?
All right, so my name is Shawn, and I go by any and all pronouns.
All right, where are you from, Shawn?
So I am originally from Sterling, Virginia, which is in Northern Virginia, Loudoun County specifically.
All right, so when did you move to here, Richmond?
So I've been going to VCU here since my freshman year. I was here for 6 months freshman year before COVID, and I recently moved back in August, so I've been here for like 3 months now.
So you go to VCU here and stuff. So
Yes.
What made you want to go to VCU?
Honestly, out of all the colleges I applied to, they gave me the most money. That's really why I decided to come here. And I'm also not gonna lie in that VCU does a really good job of trying to make it seem like, you know, we're so diverse and like we're all about diversity and like, you know, we're one big family. So they really try to like get those incoming high schoolers and like all that. And that's really why I came here. I don't regret coming to this school because I've met so many great people and been involved in Richmond, but at the same time, I can't ignore the ways in which this school kind of like acts like a predator.
So can you elaborate on those ways?
Yeah, so like I said, they, in terms of like recruitment, they do like a really like, I guess, big job in like trying to make the school seem as inclusive as possible and as, you know, diverse and like, you know, they'll put, that's why every time you go on the VCU website or any type of, you know, recruitment admissions thing, they'll always have like a Black person or another person of color as like the first thing that you see. This school very much tokenizes its Black students specifically. And, you know, this school doesn't really sit with the fact that it is in the capital of the Confederacy and the history and the ways in which this school has actively done so much against the Black community in Richmond specifically. But yeah, I would say like one of the biggest things is that they focus so much on this, you know, we're so diverse without actually engaging in that and what that looks like and trying to, you know, protect and nurture their Black students.
So what are some ways you personally dealt with VCU as a Black student?
I would say in terms of like, I'll go to the finances first. That's another reason why they kind of got me here. They offered me a merit-based scholarship, which they kind of took forever to apply. And I will say with me, I've dealt with a lot of like kind of ignorant faculty and professors as well too, and that I've just seen what this school has done to other Black students as well. I guess with me personally, like I've just dealt with a lot of white faculty that don't know how to properly teach and engage with Black students. It's interesting because when you look at the statistics of the racial makeup of the student body, it's fairly evenly split, not so much compared to like the city, but there's a decent amount of like Black, white, Asian, you know, non-Black Hispanics here. But when you look at the faculty, it's very much like majority white. There's barely any like Black or brown faculty and people in positions like in administration and stuff like that.
So would you say VCU doesn't prioritize Black or brown students?
No. not at all, and not as they should be, because given the history of both this city and how VCU has actively, contributed to, like, we can go on, but like gentrification for one of them.
Yeah, so this brings us to my next question. What is VCU doing that is impacting Richmond as a whole?
I'd say the easiest and quickest answer would be just buying up so much property, or buying out property, to use the terminology, because what they're doing is that they're actively kicking businesses out and kicking people out of their homes and raising the rents for whatever new facility that they need at that moment in time. We see it with a lot of the local, especially Black-owned businesses. Like recently, the woman who owns Jamaica House had to move from her original location to another because VCU bought that building. VCU has often, I remember when I was a freshman, everyone talked about Mansion, which is near, what's it called, on that street, near Aubon Pond, however you pronounce it. And it used to be like a majority like Black nightclub, and that building still sits empty to this day. VCU just happens to own that building. And so not only are they buying out buildings, if they're not, building something new for only them to use, then it's just sitting there empty. And VCU really doesn't know where its priorities are in terms of like facilities and stuff like that. Like, there's so many other buildings and other departments that are severely underfunded that the university doesn't put their money towards. And in terms of the city, my biggest issue is that VCU preaches about being, integrated within the city. Like, Richmond is the campus, not just Monroe Park and MCV. Richmond is the campus. Yet they actively segregate from a lot of the Richmond population, because a lot of these facilities are just for students, even though we are in a city. And, again, it's more dark-sided because VCU preaches that we're like integrated within the city while actively segregating.
So, do you feel that there's things that Richmond can do? VCU can do to make Richmond a better place? Like, what are some ways that you would like to see change?
So in terms of the tangible, just like giving stuff back to the city, I know for one thing, we've talked about Monroe Park as one example, and how, just giving the park back to the people and not really having it be like a VCU center staple. Actively, not buying up property and forcing people to move out because they're raising the prices and they're buying out people. That's another way that they can help the city. They can promote more of a, student unity with Richmond residents. Yes, we live in a city, and yes, there's, crime, but oftentimes I feel like those little alerts that everybody gets, it's a lot of fear mongering that, again, I come from Nova, and a lot of times a lot of Nova kids are taught to, be wary of like living in a city and dealing with, houseless folks, specifically Black houseless folks in cities, because, they can hurt you, and, they can steal from you, which like you can get hurt and stolen from anybody. It's not an inherently Black thing, and it's not an inherently houseless thing that person is going to harm you. And of course, you should still be, especially if you are a vulnerable, like marginalized person, but oftentimes that doesn't translate into what we see here in Richmond. So you see a lot of like suburban white rich kids who are, scared of Black houseless folks simply like saying hello or asking for like a little money. So I think that's another way in which VCU can help, not take so much from the city of Richmond.
So just gearing back to you, being a marginalized person, like in what ways does that affect you? Like, being from VCU and I mean, not excuse me, being from Nova and coming to VCU and seeing this, like.
So another reason why I say like I love the city of Richmond and I align with Richmond more than I do the school is because Richmond is a very Black and is a very queer city. And as a Black queer person, it's, you know, I've been in spaces where I do feel so welcomed and safe compared to Northern Virginia. Specifically, Loudoun County is very much conservative, right-wing, very predominantly majority white, especially if you go out of the, you know, kind of suburban areas, because it is a lot of like farmland, especially towards West Virginia. But I would say, you know, being a VCU student and being specifically in Richmond, you know, the population is very split between Black and white, but there is a big prominent Black population here. And there's a big queer population here as well too. I think a lot of people, you know, who aren't queer don't realize that and don't talk about that. And so that's why I align more with the city rather than, you know, the school, because while the school may have certain students who are, you know, Black and queer, the city as well is too. And it's such a rich and vibrant community. And I just feel, you know, essentially I do feel more at home here than I do at my like, you know, actual home. And I've only been here for like 3-4 months. So yeah.
All right. Well, I want to get back more into like being a VCU student and stuff. Can you tell me like your major and?
Yeah, so it's a lot. So I am a double major in English and African American Studies. And I also minor in gender, sexuality, women's studies, and recently in queer studies as well. And that's just because, you know, I love reading and writing. And I love learning about like Africana studies and like diaspora studies and, you know, specifically the literature and writing that is involved in Africana, because Africana studies is very much interdisciplinary, which means that it can go into basically anything. And, you know, I also have that GSWS and queer studies minor because, you know, that is like my praxis. That is the way I carry myself and present myself to the world. And that is how I am socialized. And so it is very important that I learn, you know, not like, you know, we can all talk about theoretical concepts, but like it's lived experience as well too. It's putting, you know, vocabulary and like certain understandings behind lived experience, because language is very powerful. And that's why, you know, I'm an English major, because I believe in the power of language and the power of words. And when we have words for things in our lives, that puts validity behind it. Yeah.
Do you plan on doing like anything with that major? Like,
so yeah, I've been like, you know, as we all are college students, we're all figuring out like, what do we do with our lives? What do we do after undergrad? And I have been leaning a lot into education, just because I love, you know, facilitating. I love learning with people. I love being, you know, in a collaborative space. You know, I want to, that's another big thing, is that oftentimes in education, we think there's a hierarchy between teacher, student, professor, student. And I want to foster an environment where we're all on an equal playing field, because we are all learning from each other. And, you know, if I were to be in a classroom, there would be no hierarchy, essentially. Like I would be on an equal footing with the students I find myself with, whether that's in academia, higher education, you know, upper level or early elementary, I'm not sure yet. But, you know, also because of my identity, I would want my pedagogy, which is basically the way I teach, the philosophy of teaching, to be centered around that. Because oftentimes, especially in the education system within this country, it's very white, it's very Eurocentric. You know, it's not a safe space for people who don't fit into that mold. And, you know, it often doesn't allow people to question. You know, when we're in high school, especially because of standardized testing, we're not allowed to question and we're not allowed to analyze. And that's why when you get to academia, a lot of people are underprepared because they're not used to being asked to analyze and to question and to investigate. But yeah, that's what I want to do with all of like my majors and my form of study.
So since you plan on becoming an educator, like what steps do you plan on taking to like help Richmond youth and give them what they need and stuff?
So I do know that VCU and the School of Education here specifically does have a pathway into Richmond Public Schools and other schools in the area like Henrico, Chesterfield, all that other stuff. I would, if I choose to work in the school system, which I probably will, I would want to stay down here. I would not want to go back to Nova just because, like I said, it's majority white. Even if I would technically be paid more, I would rather do and make more of a difference with people who look like me than not. And I just feel more affirmed down here. And I just want to help majority Black students, honestly. I want to be that, teacher that, that their room is a safe space, and that if you're dealing with anything at home or in the real world, at least you can enjoy like coming to my class and knowing that that's a safe space. And like I said before, my pedagogy is definitely involved with specifically catering to like Black queer youth. And just, because if you focus on, sad to say, but if you focus on the most marginalized, you're going to help everybody at that point. Was that a lot? Was that deep?
You're good. You're good. Focusing a lot on uplifting Black voices. I want to ask, is there any other ways you feel marginalized regarding other groups, people, VCU, Richmond, like?
Yeah, I will say, because, me and my family were also Vietnamese, and a lot of us are Black Vietnamese people. So I've had my fair share of, being marginalized in that space, which is very, kind of upsetting because, we all talk about POC solidarity, and oftentimes, that doesn't exist because anti-Blackness is so prevalent and runs rampant in, communities that just aren't white. Talking from a Vietnamese perspective, a lot of Vietnamese people are very, just, I would say, not insinuating that all of them are, but a decent amount are very, conservative. And that has to do with the history of the war in Vietnam and the ways in which the US government actively, pits people, oppressed people against each other, specifically. And so, me, my mom, my uncle, because we're the Black ones in our family, we've had our fair share of like being followed or being questioned, and like, having like, the micro and macro aggressions, both from, white and just other non-Black communities as well too. I remember an instance when I was in California, specifically in Westminster. That's the largest concentration of Vietnamese people outside of Vietnam. And I went in a store. It was like a store that sold like clothes and ao dai and stuff like that, and which is like Vietnamese traditional clothing. And this lady was like, I could tell like out of the corner of my eye that she was following me, and that she was like making sure like, and I was a high schooler at the time, and I was like, shoot, like I hope she doesn't think like I'm gonna be stealing or anything. And because I've had to deal with that from white people, that was my first time dealing with from a Vietnamese person. And so to kind of like alleviate that tension, I turned to her and I spoke in Vietnamese because I can speak a little Vietnamese. And I basically was talking about, oh, like, this is beautiful, like, whatever. And then her attitude completely changed all of a sudden. Now, I don't know if, that was because I was Black and, Black people are always seen as foreign, or if it was, something like, oh, like I'm just American, and like she felt like that there was a connection after that. But it was very bittersweet moment because, she was initially following me as well too, and because she was a Vietnamese person. And I've just dealt like, I'm not trying to like call people out, but like, in this school as well too, like there's been a lot of instances, specifically from like other like, you know, Asian students of being anti-Black. So yeah.
Is all that, like, how does it make you feel?
Frustrated, very frustrated. I'm all about educating. So, you know, not to go too far off the question, but I remember earlier this year when we had the Atlanta shootings, and, you know, a problem is that everyone is always reactionary. So everyone's involved in the moment, and then after it dies down, it kind of just goes away. And nobody wants to have these conversations anymore until the next tragedy happens. So me and a couple other students wanted to have discussions about that, and wanted them to make them ongoing discussions. So we planned, you know, a meeting, like, you know, like a round table type thing. We could like talk about, you know, the you know, discrimination that Asian people face, but then also going a step beyond and seeing, okay, well, how do Asian Americans as well, you know, contribute to the, you know, to use the terminology, anti-Asian hate that happens here? Because what we ended up seeing in our group was that, you know, people will scream anti-Asian hate while also, you know, using US counterpoints against China, while being classist towards recent immigrants from Asia, and while actively, you know, just believing and co-opting American propaganda and imperialist motivations, and not recognizing how even immigrants can contribute to settler colonialism. And what that is basically, you know, when you come to a place and you don't acknowledge the people who were, you know, originally here first, and you kind of try to wipe that as a way, you know, we see it in the American dream myth that you can pick yourself up by your bootstraps type stuff. And so, you know, not just white folks, anyone can contribute to settler colonialism if you're not careful. But we saw that a lot, and we wanted to talk about that. You know, not only did we want to talk about, you know, there's pride in, you know, being Asian American, but, or just being Asian in general, because like, I don't think there's pride in being American, but, you know, just being prideful in your identity, where you come from. But then we saw how many people, you know, still contributed to the discrimination, and also, again, just the raging anti-Blackness within, you know, specifically Asian spaces. And I'm talking about this coming from a Vietnamese person. And we tried to have these conversations, and after the first meeting, it was great, it was received well. And then we were like, okay, this is going to be continuous, because we didn't want to be reactionary. And after that first meeting, nobody showed up. So it was just me and a ragtag group of people in an Asian American sexuality class having these conversations. And I was just frustrated because, you know, it was the bare minimum to me. We were literally just having the conversation. We weren't even talking about action yet. You know, we weren't telling people to go out into the streets and do all that stuff, but yeah.
Do you see a lot of things that you consider bare minimum?
Oh yeah. You know, social media activism, for one, you know, posting your little Black squares, posting, you know, your share if you think Black Lives Matter. You know, we're in an age where now the liberal tendency to be seen as a decent person is to repost and get likes and engagement, rather than actually speaking, and like speaking in a way that is like what I'm doing now, and being active in your community. And that isn't to say everybody, you know, needs to go out and be in the streets. Oh, well, I will argue for that. But it's also about, you know, it starts, you know, at home. It starts with the people in your community. It just starts with, you know, being out and involved in your community. Again, VCU fosters such a segregationist mindset where it's like the students and then versus everybody else. And we're an integrated community because we are in a city, and because VCU essentially is also buying up everything in Richmond. So, you know, you have no choice but to be integrated into the city. And that's why I think people choose to not be. And that's like, that's also, you know, a bad thing, because now it's like, it's not willful ignorance. You're actively, you know, doing the most to not be involved with the city and its citizens and stuff like that.
So, going back to just a few points you made previously, you brought up the American dream. Now, my question to you is, what can Richmond / VCU do to help you achieve your American dream?
I would say there's many layers to this question. First is the finances. You know, give more, and I'm trying to think of just a one tangible piece of evidence or piece of like actual like action. Give money, give more need-based scholarships to your students who need it, and make them widely available and widely known. But yeah, just giving more needs-based scholarships, making them widely known, because, you know, like I said, you're looking for a needle in a haystack, and then two, you're essentially begging and doing the utmost to even get like a smidgen of aid. So that's one way. And then, like I mentioned before, just fostering a better, more unified community, making this school an actual safe space for its Black students. Because, you know, by hiring and retaining, because that's another thing, you can hire as much Black faculty you want, but if you're not actively working to retain them, then it's like they're either gonna go somewhere else, or, you know, like that's another thing, VCU doesn't want to like essentially retain its Black faculty. That's why you see a lot of adjunct, because they don't want to, you know, pay. And, you know, the road to tenure is so overly complicated, and that's a whole nother story. But yeah, basically making it more accessible and easier to retain Black faculty, because if the faculty represents the actual student population, then you will have more students who are engaged, more willing to learn and be in class and be in community with people who look like them.
So my last question is, do you have any advice to give to anybody that may be watching this?
I would say, with all that I've said, you know, still find space for yourself and for your mental health and your happiness, because joy is resistance, you know, and to, at the same time, not be satisfied because, you know, there's always work that needs to be done. You know, yes, we can check the boxes and, you know, be happy about the small victories, but it's a constant process. And you can, you know, we're in the imperial core. We're in, you know, the United States of America. And so we need to do everything as, you know, citizens of this country to make sure that this country is not hurting others globally, both, you know, on a grand scale and then also locally as well too. So for VCU students, you know, take time for yourself, but also like be vigilant and be, you know, have all the smoke, you know, for this institution. Because, you know, we're all individual voices. When we come together, we can make, you know, great change, to sound cliche, but, you know, a revolution happens with a group of people. So yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.